Hi guys, and welcome back to another one of my making videos. So I'm still in love with my Anycubic Vyper 3D printer and making things with that, resin and LEDs. And that's exactly what I've done here. And I've made this crashed Orc UFO, which can be used as a bit of terrain for, well, for any kind of tabletop gaming. And obviously the joy about using a 3D printer is I can make exactly what's in my head, which is really nice. So the big question is this the end of sprue builds as we know it? As I'm just loving 3D printing. Anyway, back to making this. So started off by obviously, well, 3D printing lots and lots of little bits. Again, I scrolled through Thingiverse looking for a UFO, as I really wanted like the typical kind of like UFO with big domed top. And that's exactly what I found. I'll leave a link in the description to where I'll get the files. I don't think I really changed much of this. I think it might have had a bottom and I might have hollowed the bottom out. I can't remember to be honest. But yeah, printed off in parts. Again, the settings I'm using are pretty low settings. So the Anycubic Vyper printer really can print off some exceptional pieces. But because the kind of things I make, and then when obviously I paint them, I make them rusty, there's no real need to sort of put in all that fine detail, mainly because obviously it takes a lot longer to print. So yeah, so I print them off pretty quickly, and I have them on a very low setting, but they're still very usable parts, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, simple little pieces to put together, and I've got my little orc, which I'm going to be standing up in this thing. And yeah, that's kind of almost the build almost done really. I'm going to have obviously LEDs in this at a later stage, so I just need to make the holes a bit bigger to accommodate LEDs in all these, well, these little light flashy bits that are around the side. That's the thing I might actually look for, is some flashing LEDs, as I think that'd be pretty cool. I'm also looking at getting a 3D package where I can have a go at starting to make my own sort of builds and figures. Then what I've sort of seen so far is Blender. But if any of you guys know of any sort of 3D packages for beginners, by all means leave them in the comments, as yeah, I'm really getting into this 3D printing business. Well, obviously not business, but yeah, no, thoroughly enjoying making printing bits out, making things. So yeah, it'd be fun to actually sort of make my own pieces. So as you can see, I've printed out some rocket launchers, some guns, and some bits and pieces that I can obviously use just to make this more orky. And say these kind of like panels are great because these I can make whatever size I need, and obviously make as many as I need, which is awesome. I know a lot of you guys are probably sort of saying right now, but you haven't got a 3D printer, so you can't make any of the builds I'm making. And for that, I can only say I'm sorry. But I'm currently like a fat kid in a cake shop. Because I am just super excited and just loving this printer now. I say I had the other printer for about 9 months, barely really used it, mainly because of the time taken to sort of set the thing up and then clean the prints afterwards. Whereas obviously this Anycubic Vyper printer, it literally is a case of switch it on, stick in a little disc of the file you want to print, and then yeah, job's done. Print comes off, it's easy to pull off the plate, and you know, no cleaning involved. You can just get straight on to sort of adapting it, modifying it, and obviously printing it. So yes, I'm using my usual sort of rust effect on this because I want this to be quite a rusty sort of buckety looking thing. But I'm also going to try another technique which I think I may have tried once before and didn't work, and that's hairspray and salt. I know I've done the hairspray a couple of times and that's kind of worked-ish, but the other one I've seen is where you use hairspray and salt, and then obviously you just rub the salt off. And this should obviously reveal the rust sort of effect you've made underneath. So yeah, I'm going to have another go at that. And yeah, obviously keep watching guys to see how well that sort of happens. So I'm using a couple of different shades of kind of like a brownish sort of colour. And obviously the baking soda, because obviously that's what gives it the kind of rusty sort of texture. And yeah, again, no real patterns. This really does get this stuff on all over the place. Because the other brown's still a little bit wet, they kind of like mix in, which is pretty cool. And yeah, as you guys all know, I do like doing a bit of rust. Obviously I will be painting this in a colour afterwards, but I do like to sort of get the rust on first and then paint over it and then try and reveal the rust from underneath. Obviously if you guys have got any other ideas for different sort of rust techniques, by all means let me know, because I do like trying out new things. Because obviously sometimes you might find something new that you've never tried before. It works really well and it's really easy, which is obviously what I like. Yeah, good old orc, and again, usual sort of thing, using the Citadel contrast paints. I 3D, as you can see in the background now, I 3D printed a paint pot holder, and I'm obviously using my little sprue pot holder. So yeah, I'm loving these paints. Well, as you say, these paints are expensive, and I know I keep saying this. I am going to have a go at making my own washes. I'm still yet to do that, but that is something I want to do. Just because I say these paints are great, but they're not cheap, and I do want to start making more or do more builds with orcs. Again, it's something I've been saying for ages, and I've had this channel just over a year now. I really do want to have an orc army, albeit I wanted to kind of have one that was more sort of like Star Wars in look. But yeah, again, I'm waffling now, so let's get back to the build. Yeah, and obviously sort of still painting this little fella, and I've gone for a different angle on my camera, so I thought that might mix things up a little bit here, so you can see a different sort of view of what I'm doing rather than the close-up. Yeah, I'm loving my desk, and I'm loving obviously these the paints and the pots and things. And I've just noticed my little daughter's fidget spinner on the desk there. So that's not mine, guys. That little fidget spinner is my daughter's. She's mad for fidget spinners and obviously the poppets. So yeah, definitely not mine. Anyway, back to me painting this. So my rust bucket now is fully dry. So I say I'm going with the old hairspray and a bit of salt. I've seen some really good techniques or good videos of this being used. So I'm sure I tried this once before and it failed miserably, and I'm not too sure why. So I'm having another go. I watched a few more videos, and yeah, it basically seems to be a case of putting on a hairspray on, then putting the salt on. So obviously it kind of like sticks to the hairspray, and then obviously letting that dry fully. And then once that's dried, obviously then you can go over and obviously paint the colour you're going for. So while all that's happening, again I just want to say a big thank you, a big shout out to all my patrons for helping support the channel. I know I say this every week, but it really does make a big difference, these guys supporting the channel, because it means I can continue to buy bits and pieces. And I say recently I just bought 6 kilograms worth of the epoxy resin. And yeah, epoxy resin isn't cheap. So yeah, so the guys you can now see on the screen, their donations each month have helped me sort of buy that, and obviously continue to buy more and more paints and just general bits and pieces. So yeah, if you want to consider being a patron and help support the channel, that'd be much appreciated. And obviously you get to see behind the scenes pictures and videos of what I'm currently working on before obviously it comes to YouTube. So yeah, cheers again guys, thanks so much for that. So yeah, so my little orc fellow now, as you can see, is all done. And again, contrast paints, so easy to use and great for someone who's like still a novice painter like myself. So obviously this is going to be red, because obviously as we all know it makes things go faster, well, in the minds of orcs anyway. So because obviously the salt is on there, I've seen a lot of people, they tend to use a paint spray for this. As my one isn't really working too well at the moment, I'm using obviously a brush, but so I don't disturb any of the salt that I put on, I'm just sort of dabbing it on. And fingers crossed obviously this will work. So once it's fully dried, I can then go using my little scourer to obviously try and knock off the bits of salt that I put on there. But yeah, as you can see, it's not working as well as I've seen in some of the videos I've watched. Rather than just sort of taking the salt off, it is taking off obviously the paint. Even though it is fully dried, it's just sort of like wearing down the paint rather than sort of like knocking the salt off, which obviously would give you more of a chipping effect. So yeah, I'm not too sure why that hasn't worked as well as some of the videos I've seen. I mean, it certainly made this look like it's definitely got a little wear and tear in it, but the rust effect hasn't come through as well as I say, that I have seen in quite a few videos. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board on that and try again, as I really do want to try and get this salt and hairspray technique working basically. So yeah, to finish it off, just going over obviously dry brush with a bit of silver, again just to make it look a bit more worn and sort of knocked down. I mean, this is in fact I always like doing, because I think this does sort of work really well and is obviously nice and easy. I recently bought a big pack of LEDs from Amazon, obviously good old Amazon where I buy everything, but I didn't realise I'd gone for some blue ones. Not that makes much of a difference, but obviously I was expecting them to be just sort of normal light coloured ones, or even just sort of like the warm ones, but yeah, these are blue. So now I can just feed them through the hole at the bottom, because obviously I'm going to have this on a kind of a base. Basically I'm going to make it so it's like a crashed obviously spaceship. So yeah, it's just a case of trying to poke the things through the holes. Some of the bits where I drilled, there's still a little bit of sort of debris or burr or whatever it is in there, so I can just sort of poke that out with a stick, and yeah, basically poking them through, and then once they're sort of like in that little gap, I'm then just going to sort of glue them in place, and obviously have them going out through all of these little bits and pieces, and obviously then having loads on the inside. So when I do cover it in the epoxy resin, it'll basically sort of light up the cabin area, which should look pretty cool. It's a bit of a tricky job, as there is obviously so much length of this stuff. But yeah, it's just a case of persevering with it. And it's like every now and then when I'm sort of poking it in this top bit, I'm just sort of putting a bit of glue on it, giving it a few seconds to obviously dry, and then obviously going around and putting a bit more in. So yeah, it takes a bit of time, definitely worth doing. Just because I think the end result looks pretty cool. So there we go. Obviously it all still lights up, which is awesome. It's worth checking every now and then. My little figure can now be sort of prized off the little cork sort of painting stand I'll use. And yeah, glued into position. I'm obviously checking that he's not too tall for the resin top. As you can see, that little silicone half mould is what I'm going to be using obviously to make the top dome of this. So I expect to see quite a few resin builds, guys, because as you can see, I've kind of like bought lots of this stuff. It's one of those cases of I wanted to make lots and lots of resin things, so rather than buying it in obviously smaller batches, which obviously then gets really expensive, I've gone for a big batch, which again is expensive, but obviously less expensive than those little batches. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So usual sort of thing, this one is a ratio of 2 to 1. I've already measured them out, main reason being because this thing, they are so big, I kind of poured them into a smaller container and then poured them into the bits that I need. Which I probably will do again, because these ones that they're in are very large when you only want a small amount to come out. And as you can see, I'm putting in some green paint again, because I wanted to make this, well, I wanted to make the cabin look obviously green because he's an orc. But as you've probably seen in the thumbnail, when the lights are on, that green just sort of disappears and it becomes blue. So it's all thoroughly mixed, and now I've poured it into my little silicone mould. So obviously the cunning plan here is to have the mould as it is and the spaceship upside down. So once it's cured, it'll be a perfectly domed sort of top on top of this little spaceship. Just in case there's any gaps obviously on the inside, where that hole is, I can just pour a bit more in, just so you won't see any sort of, well, gaps in it basically. So yeah, so I think this worked out really well. Really pleased with it. Obviously this is about a 12-hour curing time on this one. A few little bits did sort of seep out the side. This is obviously where I put in the extra bit of silicone, or extra bit of epoxy, sorry. But obviously, yeah, a bit did fall out. So obviously this is the nervous bit, obviously, when you do these kind of things, is has it worked perfectly? Are there going to be a gazillion air bubbles? And will it be a right mess? But as you'll see, I'm pleasantly surprised that it's come out as expected. Yeah, no real air bubbles in there. A few little bits around the edge, but I can just sort of pull them bits off. And yeah, basically it's come out just as I wanted it. So this is the only problem. When I put the lights on, that green changes instantly to a blue. I'm still happy with it, but obviously because he's an orc, I think it would have looked a lot nicer if it had been obviously green. But hey ho, we live and learn. I say these LEDs are well cheap. I think I got a pack of about 15 for about £11. Pretty cool. So yeah, so for the base, I want to make it look like he's sort of landed and crashed, so it's like broken up the ground underneath him. So I've got a few bits and pieces here that I've had sort of lying around just to use. The corkboard is the main one I kind of use here, just because the corkboard one, it really breaks apart really nice and easy, and obviously it sort of looks like it's sort of broken sort of terrain basically. But yeah, these other little bits and pieces that I use, I kind of just use them as an infill underneath, just to sort of get my little orc UFO in kind of position. So guys, as I kind of mentioned earlier, I basically use sort of Thingiverse to get my my files from. But if you guys know of anywhere else that's free to get obviously files from, by all means let me know. Or if you're a company or someone that makes models and terrain and bits and pieces, by all means, if you want to do any kind of like collaboration, where obviously, well, you send me free STLs and I will do sort of like a review of them. But yeah, by all means get in contact there as well, guys. As I say, so I really am enjoying these 3D builds, or 3D printed parts and builds, just because then I can make the things that are in my head. Obviously I do love making scratch builds and I do love making things out of sprues, but then I am quite limited in what I make. or I can make good things, but I can't always make the things that are in my head, basically. Anyway, waffling on again. So yeah, so I just kept building this thing up by obviously attaching more and more bits. Obviously the glue gun is great for this because obviously it does sort of fill in any gaps and bits and pieces. And then for the main sort of base, rather than obviously leaving it as it is, I've got loads and loads of these little stones. I mean, basically these are gravel stones from a fish tank. Got a huge big bag of these for like a couple of quid, and obviously they're great for well, making sort of ground bases basically. So yeah, using that to kind of infill here and there on the floor, in between all the rocks. Again, just to add that sort of rubble effect. Again, nice and easy, nice and quick, but effective. So I'm definitely going to be getting more of this cork board as well. Just to say that it does break apart so easy, and because when it breaks apart you get that rough edge on it. It does work really well for sort of like broken terrain, which is pretty awesome. And once that's all fully dried and in place, yeah, it looks pretty cool. So obviously my usual thing, I keep checking these lights were working so many times it's untrue. The batteries will probably run out, but I positioned the battery pack in such a way that I can obviously get to the batteries, just to obviously change them. And yeah, I wasn't too sure what kind of colour I wanted this to the terrain to go, so I've gone with a fairly basic sort of colour, and yeah, just basically painting that all over. I do like a bit of a wash afterwards, and then a bit of light dry brushing. Nothing too amazing on the floor, just going to obviously keep it nice and simple. But yeah, I think it came out pretty good, and yeah, here's some shots of it finished. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Don't forget to leave some comments down below. Let me know what you thought of this video, what you might want to see me make in the future, and say any ideas, comments about sort of 3D printed stuff would be awesome. Or just leave a comment saying hi, and I'll say hi back. So yeah, if you can click the like button as well, guys, that obviously helps out. There's a couple more videos on the screen if you go and see more of what I do. And if you are new here, guys, and you like what I do, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, as I do make a video each week. Okay, guys, that's it. Bye for now.